Technology has crashed into government before, but this time feels different. I'm going to check in with a civic technology leader today on Builders Live. Hey, I'm Chris Wink. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Technically. We're a news organization. We have an audience of technologists and entrepreneurs, and we've long covered how tech communities have come together, ecosystems that has sometimes been on the entrepreneurship side. It's sometimes been on the workforce side. It's often been around the people using technology locally. And I should add that I recently had my nails painted by my 4-year-old daughter, in case those of you watching are wondering. And we've always covered what has become and self-identifies as a civic technology community. For 15 years, we technically were often involved in civic technology communities in our local markets. That for a long time felt like it was happening in the background. And then the last 100 days with the Federal Department of Government Efficiency seems to have kind of reawaken many conversations about the role of technology in government. I felt like I needed to come back to my roots and check in with the civic technology community. I thought no better person to do that with than Christopher Whitaker, who's now the executive director of the Alliance of Civic Technologists. Christopher, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Christopher, we have done some organizing together going back many years. So why don't you start? Help me out. How do you, where you sit now, define civic technology as it sits?
Sure. So civic technology is sort of the intersection of government and technology and the civic space. That's community nonprofits, that's city, local governments. And for me, civic tech is an enabling function for the public good. While we're not doing frontline work of running food pantries, administering benefits, civic technology is an enabling function to make that work better.
I love that. Okay. Thank you for that working definition. And so, as I said at the top, students of nerdy history like myself know that we've had lots of generations talking about how technology gets deployed in government. We had a post-World War II conversations of computing. We had a 70s and era of using kind of the early proto-digital technology. We had a 90s Clinton era big federal conversation around creating efficiency through web portals and the like. And then by the 2000s, we had the emergence of data science, web tools, mobile tools, the internet, that brought us back to, well, maybe there's a lot of government efficiencies we can create. I can remember organizing early hackathons where there was conversations around how do we build little web tools that can help connect services. There was a generation of companies that tried to offer government tools to make things more efficient. And that spiraled into what we then later called civic technology. But I wonder if you could help me go back here to the early 2000s and the 2010s. How did you get involved in civic technology? Give us a little bit of your credentials. And I think the question is, was that era working? Were we doing anything of importance in that first generation of trying to get that kind of technology into federal, state, and local government uses?
Yeah. So for me personally, I came in sort of the opposite direction of many of my peers. I started out as a bureaucrat. That's what my master's degree in. My first job out of college, my first real job, was working for the Illinois Department of Employment Security during the Great Recession. I walked in my first day. There's already a line of like 20, 30 people in the snow waiting for help with their unemployment claims. Get to my office the first day, sit at my desk. There's a big box monitor, bigger than my head.
Mm-hmm.
I log into the system that I needed to use to help my friends and neighbors with their unemployment claims. It was greeted with a DOS screen.
Mm-hmm.
Green text sort of blinks at me. Come to find out, this system was built in 1975. And it wasn't a real-time system. Like most mainframe systems, it does an overnight process. And the only way you can know for certain if something works is to come in the next morning, print out a ream of paper about this thick, and go through line by line, making sure that nothing rejected. Because if it rejects, the claimant's going to come back 2 to 3 days later saying, hey, Christopher, you told me everything was fine. You told me there was money in my account. there's nothing there. I'm not working right now, and I needed this to buy groceries and pay rent. So I got really frustrated with sort of the state of technology that I had to use, because to me, as a public servant, I need the best tools possible to do my job, to solve problems for my community. And I think that's a lot of why people first got into this space, at least in our civic tech wave. We had people who were on unemployment and ended up going through that system and going, this this sucks. I don't like it, and I want to use my skills and my talent to make this better.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had people joining. For us, one of the things that Kevin Curry, the sort of the founder of the Brigade program, did was saying, you know,
The Brigade Program, Code for America, kind of these local groups of civic technologies around the country, many who are doing that work. Sorry.
yeah, and they said, I want to do this where I live. Shy Hack Night, which started not as part of Code for America's, but sort of an extension of our journalism community. Chicago has a very strong journalism community and open data community and good government community, given our history. And once Chicago started opening up data, we're like, not only do we get the transparency piece, because we want to make sure these systems are fair and accountable, but also like, hey, we could do some neat stuff to help like make some impacts. And so that's got a lot of people excited. We had National Day of Civic Hacking and people wanting to use their skills, not to make people cook ads or produce AI slop, but actually make impacts in their community. So to me, efficiency really was never part of it, although it's a good side effect. To me, it's effectiveness at solving problems facing the public. Like we the whole point of it is helping people, which is a lot of why people go into public service. Is they want to help their friends and neighbors.
I'll link to in the recap story your thoughtful essay from I think February about this idea that it's not, the goal shouldn't have been government efficiency, that it was for public good. Let me dispel of one criticism we might get to let us move forward. And I think you know this from your work. I know this from years of reporting. One of the dirty little secrets about why some government systems at all levels don't work is that actually someone doesn't want them to work. That it's very much by design. That it could be, you mentioned unemployment. There are those who philosophically and politically believe that it should be very difficult and should be very burdensome to be able to get it, and so its problems are not a failure. It's in some sense by design. I think we have to move forward because we only have so much time together, you and me. But I just wonder if you could touch on that for a second, because I have to believe in your civic technology career, you've come across that fork in the road of
administrative burden
to work.
So there's a fantastic book by Don Moynihan and Pam Hurd called Administrative Burden, Policymaking by Any Other Means. And essentially the concept is I can make something really easy so everybody gets it, like the COVID test to mail home. Pretty much
right.
You click in your address, you hit the button, it's super easy, super. Then you have something like SNAP, which makes you jump through all of these different hoops on a regular basis.
Some folks know as food stamps, supplemental nutritional assistance program. Go ahead.
And if you make it harder, then some people just they're either not going to do it, or they're going to mess it up and have to like litigate and miss out on benefits. And so you end up cutting the program that way. All these proposals we're seeing in the news around work requirements for Medicaid. Most people like, that's not a problem. But if you're trying to cut services to people who need them, that's a real easy way to cut it.
Yeah.
Some of the early civic tech apps that really took off sort of did some hacking around this. So the telephone system you have to call to check your EBT balance, it's a pain in the butt. But if we make an app that can text it instead, well, then people can use their benefits easier, and so they will. And that's where good human design comes in, or human-centered design comes in, because then you're creating these user-friendly processes to sort of jump over these barriers, which means that your utilization rate for these programs go up, which helps solve problems. But if your goal is to make sure no one actually collects any public benefits that they're entitled to, then you add more hoops. Civic technologists try to take the hoops away.
Yeah. So let me Well, help from your experience, and I totally mean in your personal experience, in any forms you've had. How often is it that a system is ineffective by someone's design versus lack of resources or lack of thoughtful support or whatever other category? Is it 10%, half, 80%?
I
How
think it's
much is an
localized.
obstacle?
I think it depends on where you're at in the program.
Mm,
In Illinois, for example, voter registration is automatic, and you can
mhm,
register to vote the same day. You don't have to, like, it is supremely easy to exercise your right to vote here. In other places, if you close polling places and add voter ID requirements and all these other hoops you got to jump through to exercise your right to vote, voting becomes harder, less people vote. Um, and I'll, for as example of how this has impacted my own life, I'm a veteran, served in the Army. When I first went to college, I went through the Montgomery GI Bill, and it was sort of a pain in the butt to get my initial benefits.
mm,
When we um, applied to buy a home through the Montgomery GI Bill, it was fairly painless because I just went online, I tapped my thing. When I went to after the PACT Act went to apply for disability benefits, tremendously easy. And part of that is the work that digital service experts at the VA worked on. They did user testing. They tried different things. They did all the right human-centered design things to make it supremely easy to apply for benefits. And so
mm.
that's one example of how it's impacting me personally is like it it works, which is the whole point.
Yeah. Let touch for me on for a sec the difference between kind of local, state, and federal. You a few minutes ago referenced Code for America. Great organization that we've been in different forms supportive of or part of, or are obviously the leader there. Um, we've had over the last 20 years. Well, actually, let me back up. What later became known as 18F or U.S. Digital Services that are sometimes associated with the Obama era, which I think is good for that administration. But I almost think politically it's more important to say it just was also the natural evolution of things. We had seen a lot of digital tools get stronger and stronger and stronger. So, of course, we wanted someone inside federal government to be thinking about how do we use software and other scales just to create efficiencies. So we've had federal level conversations of bringing civic tech mindset. We have groups around states around the country, and as you alluded to, there were little micro civic tech communities. I can remember in Philadelphia there was a kind of civic tech community before we used that phrase, and before there then was a brigade. And I can remember how great it was to kind of give it language for a group of people who were doing work to get that. In your kind of career, and maybe bring us to the moment we're in now, what is so different? I mean, let me reframe that. Is there much of a difference between the mindset of civic technology when it's being done at a local, municipal, or city level, at a state level, at a federal level? How different are those worlds and those approaches? And that'll maybe get us to the present for my last couple minutes with you.
Yeah, so um, I think it's different contexts.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah.
federal government is massive. Like the Department of Defense is the world's largest bureaucracy.
Right.
We're dealing we're dealing with millions of people. And so for like IRS direct file, one of the really smart things that they did was instead of opening the gates to everybody being able to apply at once, they limited to certain states in which, because states also have their own tax programs, they're working with their states as partners. They're testing it out. So initially you could only apply if you met certain criteria, not because there was a technical problem, but because they wanted to keep that group small so that they made sure it worked, because you don't want to mess with people's taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So the scaling is certainly different, which is both a challenge and a benefit because the federal government can't afford to hire uh, senior level technologists at
Mm-hmm.
market rates and be able to recruit people into government at large numbers. It's harder for states to do that, just because of capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing that I'd stress is like every place is different. I don't live in Atlanta. I don't know who the people are. I don't know what the biggest issues are. So in terms of the way that the Alliance of Civic Technologists operates, we're connective tissue in a support network. We don't, ACT itself doesn't build any products. We are a supporting function, so that Civic Tech Atlanta, as the one who knows their city, is driving what products they work on, what meetings they hold, how they approach the space, because Atlanta is a different city from Chicago, which is a different city from San Francisco, and certainly a different city than Dayton or Cleveland. And so part of it is being able to draw down to sort of meeting the environment, meeting your users where they're at, whether they be someone who's collecting Social Security disability or trying to help feed their community at their local food bank. Like, there's a wide variety of contexts.
I'm going to lose you in a sec, which is I regret, because as you and I talked before, very obvious this is too big a conversation for our little touch in. So consider it just a quick touch base. But something from 16 plus years tech and business reporting, for me, it's very obvious that markets do great stuff, but they, left to their own devices, end up in kind of consolidation, which is why we try to address it. And I think there's something very obvious around government that default incredible work, but left to its own devices, you can just kind of get some redundancy over time. Systems kind of build up. And so for me, what has felt like it should be able to be a bipartisan issue should be, maybe we should correct for the worst of both these worlds. And in the government context, we might want to, every once in a while, check how we're doing, clean out the attic, check out the programs, see how do we do things a little bit better and more effectively. So there's one version of the world where someone were to say, in a parallel universe, this moment that we're having with the Department of Government Efficiency DOGE is another continuation of that, and that any kind of like reckoning with government delivery of services and saying we should do better is natural. We've done it before. We did it in the 90s. We'll do it again. How much of this work is a continuation versus a corruption of what you've put so much of your career to?
So I think one of the things that a good product manager will always ask is, what problem are you trying to solve?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're looking at sort of making government more efficient, which is not the same thing as effective, the people, if you're trying to say, well, we want to save the government money, we want to be better stewards of taxpayer money by sort of decreasing cost. On the tech side, 18F literally wrote a book for both federal and state on how to de-risk procurement, lower cost, and get more bang for your buck. And then they laid off everybody whoever touched that. So that's where my issue comes in, is if you were interested, if the problem you're trying to solve is you want these IT contracts to be more effective and more efficient, then you would do exactly what 18F is doing. Their de-risking guide is sort of the go-to place for both state and federal government agencies to say, okay, I need to buy a new software system. I want to do it in a way that is not going to screw me. It's going to deliver me results quickly. And that's the 18F de-risking guide.
So what are they trying to do, Christopher?
I mean,
do you have an official or stance on that?
I mean, for me, and that's and part of why I think people are still interested in volunteering their time at places like Open Oakland and Florida Community Innovation is they want to help people. They want to use their technology skills to help their neighbors and to solve the problems that are in their community. That's why I'm here for. And that's why people were drawn to public service like United States Digital Service and 18F, Colorado Digital Service, like all these places, because you want to have positive impacts on your communities.
That's the way to go. Christopher, I went long. I have too many other questions to ask you. I can't get to them. Christopher, thanks for the check-in. Thanks for your work in better outcomes for communities through government. I appreciate it, Christopher.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to you next time. See you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.